a.m. and I call to order the February 27th, 2026 Board of Trustees Workshop and Business Meeting. The district is in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act by notifying the media of the date, time, and place of the meeting. The district tapes the meeting for accuracy in preparing minutes. I now yield the floor to Vice Chair Beth Shealy.
Madam Chair, fellow board members, staff, and guests, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Madam Chair. I now yield the floor back to you.
As we have been reviewing some of our board policies, we realized we do not have a representative.
Yeah, we need to approve it.
Do you have a motion? Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Madam Chair, I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Thanks, Ms. Shealy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. As I was saying, we've been reviewing some of our policies and realized we do not have a representative on the District Wellness Committee as stated in policy ABF. So at this time, I'd like to make a motion for Mrs. Flashnick to serve as the board representative on the District Wellness Committee. Do I have a second? Thank you, Mr. Pizzuti.
You made the motion, Madam Chair.
Yes, is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion. Now we'll move on to the workshop portion of our meeting. This workshop with McMillan, Paz, and Smith will be the first of two workshops for MPS to share their findings from their facility study, district needs, and proposed plans, for the board to provide feedback. The second workshop will be held March 10th with the final report presented to the Board of Trustees meeting on March 24th, 2026. I'll now turn over to Mr. Clark Cooper to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Chair Henson. As you mentioned, we are excited today to have our first of two board workshops with our contractor, McMillan, Pasden Smith, who has been working diligently for just over a year to provide information and conduct a comprehensive facility study for Lexington School District 1. In a second, I'll turn it over to Ms. Michelle Smith and let her introduce her team. But I will tell you, and just as a reminder, as I said earlier, they've been working for over a year with us. They have done a yeoman's share of work that has been very much in the trenches, in the weeds, whatever you want to call it, across all of our campuses, speaking with school administrators, district staff as well, to get an understanding of the status of our facilities, to look at the information that was provided from our demographer that completed the demographic study earlier last year, and to make recommendations for Lexington 1 to continue to be able to serve our students in facilities that meet the standard that this board and boards before have ensured. I will mention, and I think we'll close with this as well. No decisions have been made at this point. This is information. These are scenarios. These are possibilities. They are not decisions that have been made. This is information for this board to be able to see, to be able to ask questions, to be able to interface with the contractor directly over the next month prior to that final presentation at the March board meeting. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Michelle Smith to introduce the team and get started.
Great. Well, good morning, everyone. We're absolutely delighted to be here and so grateful to have had the opportunity to work with Lexington 1, with your school district, with your school leaders, and with your community. My name is Michelle Smith. I'm a principal and an architect with McMillan, Paz & Smith Architecture. We've brought Sarah Bonesteel here with us today. She is an architect, and she has led the small army of team to tour every single one of your district facilities and assets. Sarah and team have walked 4 million square feet of your assets and ownership over the course of about 5 months it took. And then since then, we've been collecting various inputs to inform the plan, the preview of which you will see today. We also have Maggie Dittmar, a great partner of us from Thompson Turner Construction. She has been working with us as well to help finalize and put inputs into the plan. So today, and for the next our next meetings together, we are going to review the long-range facility plan as it is beginning to shape up. Again, like Mr. Clark said, this is a draft. We realize that this is the first time you are seeing some of this information. So it's very important for us to review with you in a consolidated way what we've been doing over the past year. So there are a lot of slides here today. We're going to try to move through it. But we also want to be open to any questions that you may have as we review. So today, and again, in the next couple of workshops, we're going to review capital projects to satisfy the growing capacity in your district. We will review maintenance projects to maintain your current district assets and properties. And then we'll review funding and priorities regarding execution of the plan. So I just wanted to open up with a little bit about our process and how we tackle what is a very, very complex endeavor. I mean, this is a major effort for you. This is a major effort for us. And so we go through it without leaving a stone unturned. What we do, it's a 3-step process. We go through a discovery process where we collect all of the data available to us in the district. Again, we have walked the schools. We've met multiple times with district maintenance. We've gotten, I don't know how many lists of any building component that you want to ask about, kitchens, site, athletics. We've all collected it. And then we start looking at all the information and processing it. We start appraising it. And then we work with, there's been a lot of back and forth with district leadership about questions that we generate through our evaluations and the process. And then finally, we start to make improvements. We think about how we can maintain your assets. We think about how we can solve for the growing capacity across your district, and be very responsible about the funding and the monies that we may have at hand. So just to go in a little bit about the nuts and bolts of what we do. Again, like I said, Sarah and team has walked nearly 40 properties. It took the course of 2 days a week, including the maintenance staff, over the course of 5 months. And what was important to us was to evaluate the physical condition assessment of every single property and make a professional judgment on the quality and the status of that physical component. So we'll go into a room, for example. We'll look at the floor, the walls, the ceiling. We'll record if there's a stain on a tile. That may indicate an issue with the building. That may indicate an issue with the roofing. It may indicate an issue with the mechanical unit, or ductwork or pipes that might fall in the ceiling above that area, and we'll note it. We'll look at, we'll look at other building components, the HVAC, the roofing, electrical components, and we've put them all into our system. When we walk, we note these deficiencies, and you'll see a slide later that speaks to the volume of deficiencies that we found. Sometimes a deficiency is cosmetic. If there's a crack in a VCT or a hole in a carpet, like that can easily be repaired. But sometimes the deficiencies can be an indication of something more systematically wrong that needs to be corrected in the building. Like again, the stained ceiling tile, that can indicate a roof leak, or it can indicate a pipe that might be leaking or condensing on that tile above the ceiling. When we go through and we collect all of these deficiencies, we assign a score to every single one, which might indicate where that deficiency falls in the lifetime of the building. A score of 5 means that the space or what we're evaluating, the building component we're evaluating is like new. It's in good shape. A 4 means no issues reported, no concerns, no failures expected. It's a pretty good score. A score of 3 is right in the middle. There's there's some signs of wear and tear. There's no failure, but you may want to consider replacing that component in the next 3 to 6 years. A score of 2 means that it's not looking as quality as it should be. There's obvious wear and tear. You may want to consider replacing that in the shorter term. And a score of 1 means that a building component is very worn, or there is a life safety issue with that particular observation, and you may want to replace it as soon as possible. So what we've done is, for every deficiency that we've recorded in our visual walkthrough of the school, we have assigned a score to it. So all of this starts to boil down to this main question. In terms of maintenance and forming a maintenance plan, how do we keep our schools up to date? We have all this information, we've walked through the schools. Now, this is a funny slide, but this is I started calling it a deficiency donut, because what we've done is each donut demonstrates the deficiencies, the total amount of deficiencies and their score that we collected at each facility. So in a quick glance, you can see that, say the top, I can't even read it myself, the top left donut, I think that's a number, I gotta look over here, it's 235. We recorded 235 deficiencies, physical deficiencies. Most of them, you can see, were rated a 3. That's that golden color, is a 3. The orange color is a 2, so that comprises, if I do some quick fractional, thinking, about an eighth of a circle, so that's about an eighth of the deficiencies. And there look to be a few 1s that we recorded. So you can see in this field that most of the deficiencies that we noted across your facilities were number 3. That's fair. That's pretty good. I mean, that's right in the middle. You've got some time. You've got some time before you really need to focus some energies on replacing the bulk of the buildings or the building components. But you do have some scores of 4. There is some 5, a little bit of 5. But there are some deficiencies that are scored 2 or 1. And you can really see those. You can really see those as you look across the page. And then there are some donuts that have a little more orange or red to them, if you will, meaning they have more deficiencies that have been scored a 2 or a 1. Are there any questions at this point about that method? Okay, I'll continue. Oh, yep.
Can that be sent to us?
Yes. I'm sorry. I don't know that it made it in the draft that was shared with you all last night. We're creative type. We work right until the end. So, but yes, we're happy to share that. And actually, in the next workshop, we will dive a little bit more into the maintenance plan of every single facility so that you can see it. We wanted, this actually was not the total focus of our time today, but this helps to set up what we're going to be reviewing in bulk in a little bit when Sarah gets to take the mic.
Yeah, just one comment.
Yes.
And I speak for myself, but I probably speak for a lot of people on the board. I think we would prefer to see information as soon as possible, if it's available. Keep that in mind, instead of waiting to the last minute.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Pizzuti, I can echo that because it's really, from back here, we can't read any of that.
Sure.
And it's also really hard on us to prepare kind of thoughtful questions for a workshop like this when we didn't get any information ahead of the meeting.
Sure, I apologize for that. We've, like I said, this has been a tremendous amount of information for us to cull through. We can furnish a maintenance report for every single facility. We do have that, so we'll make sure that we get that in your hands. Okay. So maintenance is kind of one way to approach this plan. Identifying what needs to be replaced, scoring it, and making a priority. The other component of this is to consider growth and capacity in your schools. And so we have to ask, are we growing? Yes, we're growing. Okay, well, where are we growing? Where specifically are we growing? And in what grades and grade cohorts are we growing? So that is when we take the demographic information and we consider it as part of the plan. We had, just a general overview of the Lexington School District and how it's growing, but you also had furnished in that demographic report specific growth and utilization, capacity utilization for every single school. So we have to take that into account as well. And I know you've seen this report. It's probably been a little over a year. You can see that in terms of capacity utilization, many of your schools are in the red. Some are doing fine, some are good, but some are in the red or approaching the red. So that first slide was the elementary school grouping, and then this slide is the middle schools and the high schools.
Madam
just to
Chair.
remind you.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The demographic study, I think, was reported to the board, if I recall correctly, about December of 2024. Does anybody else remember
That sounds right.
Have we shored up any numbers that were previously projections and found out what the actual number on something, like, for example, if something was presented in December of 2024, have we shored up if we're on track in that 25 number?
We have compared that to our enrollment projections, so yes, ma'am. And so that's something we've done internally as an administrative team of looking at, where were we on target? Where is it coming in lower? Where is it coming in higher? So yes, ma'am. And we have all three of those. I mean, there are some schools that have exceeded the projected enrollment, Deerfield, to be an example. And then there are some that it seems to be pretty much spot on. And then there's others where the demographer had predicted for 2025 more students than are currently enrolled. So yes, we have all three, and we are tracking that as we've progressed throughout this year on those 45, 90-day those reports.
So I have two follow-up questions on that. With our demographic study, folks, do we have the ability to have them go back and redo projections once we get closer to approving this final long-range plan, or is it just sort of these were the projections and it is what it is? They're not going to redo them per se.
They're not going to redo them, but do we have built in the ability to work back with them to solidify those numbers, for lack of a better term? Yes.
Okay.
We have that
And
ability.
can we get a copy before we get closer to the March meeting where we would see like the final plan, where you guys are maybe just highlight the schools for us that are below or above the tracking that y'all are currently doing? Could
Yes,
we
ma'am.
see a copy of
We'll
that?
have to look to see what run of the numbers. Is it the 45-day, 90-day? But yes, ma'am, we can put those enrollments adjacent to
Okay, cool,
those
thank you.
schools. Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? Okay. So what we've done is we have an internal Power BI dashboard that we utilize and condense this information that just helps to give us a visual display of what the numbers and the projected enrollments we're working with. So the next question that we ask in our process is, once we've determined how we're growing and where we're growing, is can our schools handle an enrollment change? And so what we've done is, after we've walked every facility, we have noted the capacity and reviewed the capacity and utilization of every single facility. This is a scan of like our working notes. We take into account the capacity provided to us by the demographer. We look at the school and we take into consideration its age, when its most recent additions were performed, if it has portables, and if it has portables, are they being used for classrooms? That's fairly important to us when calculating the actual capacity. Just to touch on utilization, it is a little bit of mathing, making the mathing work. We look at basically the number of classrooms that are identified to support the school population. We take into account how many periods are used in that classroom. We build in a little bit of a flexibility factor because, just to account for operational changes that may happen from year to year, if there's the need for one less fifth grade classroom one year versus a fourth grade classroom, we want to ensure for that flexibility, and we come up with a target utilization for every facility. And just to now segue, any questions about that? Okay. Then the next question we ask, well, how can we improve our schools? And there's several different ways we can go about improving our schools. We can think about, depending on their age and their use, we can think about replacing our schools. We can think about converting them, thinking about repurposing them, or changing their use if needed. We can think about building a new school. We can also think about adding on to schools or renovating schools. So these are the types of projects that we want to consider when we start to take all of these factors into account. So we had a little bit of a visioning session with your leadership, and we wanted to capture some themes that were really important for us to remember and consider as we're putting together this plan. For this district, growth, modernization, and safety are the top priorities. Those are the top priorities of the plan. We want to ensure that we are being responsible, being fiscally responsible with the funding and building trust in the community to support the plan. We found that there is a strong desire for expanded CTE and student support programs with this plan. And with the funding and trust component, transparency and cost accuracy are also important to us. We want to ensure that, in the execution of the plan, community engagement is important. And as we think about expanding the capital assets that you all as a district have to care for and maintain, we want to ensure that infrastructure and operating costs are also considered. I mean, if we want to bring a new, facility online, we have to remember that we've got to staff that facility, maintain that facility, ensure that we have the correct operating background for it. We also came up with
Ms. Smith.
Yes.
Excuse me just a second.
Please.
On that previous slide, you had top bullet, growth, modernization, and safety are top priorities. You said those are the top priorities for our district, or
For the plan.
For the plan
For
itself?
the plan. When we think about putting together the plan and the components of the plan, we have to ask, is it satisfying growth? Is it modernizing the facility in the way it needs to be improved? Some of those 3s and 2s. Are we bringing the physical asset up in the correct way? So it's not just about it's not just about thinking about how to add on to accommodate more students and put more desks in classrooms. We have to think about maintaining the asset as well, because some of these schools are 20, 30 years old. Some of them need major building component replacements, HVAC, roof components. Those building components can be very expensive. If you think about an elementary school that's 80, 90, 100,000 square feet, and if 90% of its roof needs to be replaced, that's a major cost. So, does that make sense? So
Yeah, it makes
modernization,
sense.
that's really what that.
I was just trying to understand if that's kind of a best practice, what you all look at, or did we actually present that to you and say, hey, here's our top 3?
In a poll with your district leadership, that's the feedback that we got.
Okay, thank
But
you.
we see it across across the state and with the districts that we work with, so. And just to touch on some long-range plan principles that we also put together, I've mentioned these in the prior bullets, but safety and security is first. Equity and access is also important. We have to plan for growth. CTE responsiveness is should be an important part of the plan. We also want to make sure we're creating future-ready spaces. When we think about new spaces or modernizing educational spaces for students and teachers, we want to ask, how are they going to be learning in 5 years? How are they going to be learning in 10 years? We certainly want to implement those best practices into what we do. Stewardship, we want to ensure that we are that we are maintaining your assets in the best way. We want to be physically responsible, transparent, and we want to, create inclusive programming. So when we think about how to add on to a school or renovate a school, we want to ensure that we are informed by your instructional team. We're not just like adding 5 classrooms here. We want to make sure that we're adding the academic spaces that you need, the academic support spaces that you need, like another teacher office or a resource room or a small conference room. All of those things have to go into the programming, the space programming of it. Again, we want to think about infrastructure and the technology that's needed to make these improvements. Land and new buildings. You're going to see that there may be the need to acquire land for a future school. That is going to be part of this plan. Phasing and deliverability. So that speaks to, we can't do it all at one time. We can't boil the ocean. If we did, we'd kill everybody. So we've got to think about how and when we roll out certain projects and certain improvements. It's a major tax on your community. It's a major tax on contractors like us, and the folks in the field who are actually building the buildings, doing the work. So we want to ensure that it's prioritized, it's over time, and it's phased properly. And then, obviously, sustainability also needs to be a consideration as we continue to think about maintaining these assets and holding on to them for the next several decades.
May I ask you a question about vision and long-range principles?
Sure.
At what point, in y'all's experience of doing these with, I'm sure other districts and organizations, at what point in the planning process do you collect community feedback? Once the plan is kind of set in stone, or throughout the process, have y'all sent surveys or things like that?
Does Libby want to answer that, or?
My experience has been it's most effective to get a draft plan and take that out so that you have something for people to respond to, because you go out without some type of guardrails, if you will, or some type of something for people to react to. You can end up with getting a lot of spinning plates and a lot of ideas that then you just go down roads you can't go down. So it's helpful to help guide discussions, to have something to people to react to. In my experience, we've had you get proposed work for every school, and you have attendance area meetings, and you have invite anybody can come, but you ought to make sure you have some key school leaders there who can see what has been suggested for each school and ask questions, probing questions. What has been left off? What have we forgot? What have we overlooked? They've spent a lot of time walking the schools with the principals and the people who are in the schools day in and day out. But what else have we overlooked? What have we missed? And that gives them something to look at that's concrete and help them think, but versus just sitting in a room and saying, don't have any information in front of you to think off of. I think you have more productive conversations in my experience doing it that way. And so they may say, you know what, that doesn't make sense, but how about this?
And I
has
think
been-
that makes total sense from a like plan perspective. I guess my question was a little bit more about vision. Do we know that those vision principles on that previous slide match the vision of our community? Have we asked that question of our community?
Not at this point. I think right now what we've been doing is identifying that there is a need for accommodations based on what we've got moving forward. This is one of the first steps in the process. But community engagement is something that we need to be sure to do as we move forward with this, once we decide which direction we're going to go, to make sure we have ongoing conversations with our community.
Yeah, and just to expound upon that, I neglected to say that while Sarah and her team did walk all 4 million square feet of your school assets, they did meet with either the principal and or the assistant principal and the local custodian, and were accompanied by one of the maintenance staff members to walk the school. The principal also received a survey before the walk. So that was part of some of the qualitative information that we received to input into the plan. And just to further expound upon Libby's statement, it is hard to, my boss always says, come to me with a problem, but come to me with a solution as well, right? So I think it's the responsibility that we have to our communities to, if we present them with a problem, present them with a possible solution and get their input. Because, you'll see that there are several different ways to skin a cat. And I think that it is a matter of us collectively taking in the data, accepting it as fact, recognizing that there are options to what we can do, and then making a decision collectively to move forward with the best option, or what we think is the best option.
Michelle, if I can add to that, I think when we are presenting those plans in those, if you all want to, if we decide to go that direction where we take them out to the attendance area meetings and have those types of, that structure that I did, and I presented, some of you heard the presentation, the board may decide we want to change that up and do something different. I think when we talk about vision, to your point, Ms. Slashnick, what we say at that point about that, that is the vision that your district leaders who are in the schools and that's the vision that we see from being in the schools day in and day out. Does that match your vision? And yes, those are questions that we should absolutely ask. And that's where we see if we have alignment, and that gives them a baseline to do their work. And then if not, then we have to go back and do some reworking. But yes, that gives them some direction and gives us something to tell the community. This is what guided our work, because as the education professionals that are in the buildings and work in the buildings, and what we see as the needs for teaching and learning in the future, this is what we think our buildings need to do. And then does that match? And that's what we would definitely include that conversation in there as well. So I apologize for not being complete in my explanation there. Thank you for bringing that up.
So when we think about how we define these projects and their priorities, again, we want to think about if it's fulfilling a safety and security need of the facility. We also want to think about if it's fulfilling and satisfying an academic need. In some areas you'll see we simply just need more classrooms, so that's fulfilling an academic need. And then we also want to make sure we're satisfying any athletics and art supporting needs, because as we all know, those are very, very important components to complementing the educational offerings that we offer our students. So the next question we have to ask is, what will our community support? Okay. So I'm gonna let Sarah lead you through this next portion. I talked about the buckets of maintenance projects that we'll need. Every school will have a maintenance plan, which we will get. Every school will have a maintenance plan. Now we're kind of transitioning to where we need to growth and capacity. What this next kind of section will address.
Okay, so up here we have a heat map that we created based on the demographer's information and the capacity and utilization of all of your facilities. It's color-coded by the elementary schools, but you can also see the thickest black lines there for your high school boundaries, and the thinner ones are for the middle school. So clearly here, the darker that it is, the more overcapacity it already is. So you can kind of visually see where some of those problem areas lie. We're going to breeze through this here because we'll dive into it when we go into every cluster, but we did talk through all of our meetings, a ton of scenarios and possibilities. We kind of solidified on the ones that we think make the most sense financially, spatially, for a lot of other reasons. We've highlighted those ones in bold, and that's what we'll go over in the individual clusters.
Yeah. We wanted to look at, excuse me, we wanted to look at the grouping.
Okay.
Just to clarify the map, when you said the thin line versus the dark line, can you give me an example? Because like the white lines versus the black lines, or?
Yeah, so in the Gilbert zone, for example, there, that white one is cutting it in half there, but the harsh black outline around, everyone goes into the high school. Does that
The
kind of
white
make sense?
is the middle school boundary, and then is the elementary school boundary, and the black is the high school boundary.
Yeah, and then the thin black line is the middle school.
Okay, then.
That's when middle school.
Right, yeah. So,
I know I have bad sight.
yeah, so you got Centerville up in the top of Gilbert over there, separated by that white line. So. Okay, so Gilbert is the first cluster that we decided to look at today. So that's Centerville Elementary, Gilbert Elementary, middle, and high school. When we were looking at the needs for utilization and simply from a capacity standpoint initially, how many classrooms would need to be added to these schools to fit the 10-year projection given by the demographer on how many students they assume you're going to have. So if we just went straight for it and did additions, they would need 14 classrooms, 14, 5, and 5. So scenario one, we looked at doing additions at all 4 campuses. When we met with leadership, we talked through some of the issues that can come along with that. For example, at Gilbert, we have a sewer line capacity issue. We've got site constraints. Some of them are already built out so much that doing an addition wouldn't really make sense. You wouldn't have the space to do it there. So we kind of got rid of scenario one. I'll jump to scenario 3. We also talked about doing a new high school, repurposing the elementaries to be primary, being pre-K through second, and repurposing the middle to be an upper and the high school to be the middle. We decided that scenario 2 kind of does the same thing, but for less money, because building a new middle school, you can still accommodate the needs of the students and population there. So here, what we were thinking as a possible scenario is to build a new middle school, repurpose the existing elementaries to be primary. Because of the classroom sizes that they already have, it would make more sense. Repurposing the existing middle school to be an upper elementary, and some significant additions and renovations at the high school. And again, these are all just possible scenarios, but we wanted you to see why we thought through a couple of the different options in each cluster.
It's financially informed. I mean, if you look at scenario 1, all 4 facilities.
Yeah, sorry.
Walking
I'll
away.
say it on the mic.
Okay.
I was just asking if it was a financially informed decision, basically because we don't, in our district, currently have lower and upper elementary as our educational practice. And
Right. Yes. I mean, yes, if we took into account, primarily the driver was, well, okay, so if I go back to scenario 1, we would have to build at all of them, all of the schools, we would have to add on, and if you add on 14 at CES, 14 at Gilbert Middle, 5 at GES, and 5 at Gilbert High, that's 38 classrooms. That's a school. That's a school, right? So we look at that and we think about, wow, you know, we're adding on, we're like mobilizing, we're getting a construction team, or we're touching every campus, or we build a new school. So that's either a middle school or it's a high school. you know? And you all know the cost of building a high school. I mean, it's upwards of $100 million, you know, and just the sheer number of square footage. We felt pursuing building a new middle school is probably the best scenario to entertain at this time. Now, what you'll see today and the rest of this are just our first options, okay? You know, we would love some input on these. You know,
I'll not interrupt, well, I guess I am interrupting, but, so, living this life every day, because I'm living the Gilbert area, and when you look at the demographer's report, it's showing the high school is already in all red. The middle school is going to hit red in a couple years. I'm having a problem myself just knowing how it's been with a new middle school instead of a new high school. Not just because of the classroom size, but as a parent of drivers, the kids that drive to the high school, they have run out of parking. They've had to use practice fields to, you know, use for parking at times. And then it doesn't even go into the account that, yes, it is more money, but then you bring in the athletic facilities that go with the high school, and that just seems to be something that, you know, that I can tell you the community in Gilbert definitely wants to see as well. So I'm having a problem with just why the new middle school makes sense over a new high school. I get the financial strain, and I appreciate that we're looking at the financial strain, but are we looking at what's good, you know, 5-10 years from now, or what's going to be best 20 years from now?
I mean, our immediate charge is to look at 5 to 10, you know, 5 years from now, and beyond that. You know, as we get farther away from our recommendations, it's harder to predict, right? So, you know, after that 5-year mark, we're in the path of uncertainty. We might need to do another, you know, demographic study to do the next forecast. And, you know, we have talked about athletics at many of these schools. We were not drilling down to the specifics of every facility in this particular workshop because we wanted to introduce these clusters and how this kind of math problem is dovetailed. Like, we can't just look at one facility and making improvements. We've got to look at how they work together to satisfy growth and capacity. You bring up some great comments about what a high school needs. A high school needs parking. A high school needs athletics. It needs not just the building. So it's a pretty large investment for a high school. Not to mention the amount of land that we need. And so to build, you know, a new school, we'd have to find land, and we'd have to, you know, ideally find the amount of land that's the most appropriate for that school. So,
Can I ask a process question real quick?
Sure.
My thought is that this presentation is to give us kind of a general first brush proposal of some potential options.
Yes.
And that from here, we would take maybe some feedback like Mr. Pizzuti shared and some desires, and then y'all could recalibrate and share pros and cons. I just want to make sure we don't get like stuck up in the weeds so that we can't get through the full presentation,
Yes.
just to make sure we're understanding.
That's
Okay.
that's absolutely on par. That's exactly our understanding, and that's what we want to deliver to you today too. So, but I do
Real quick,
I do want these
think
questions.
To dovetail on Mrs. Shealy's comment, though, what is the best way to be providing you that feedback? Today in the workshop or after the workshop? Because I would think that doing it while we're all here as a board, since it ultimately is a board decision that's going to have to be discussed, that it's a good use of our time to talk through what we do and don't think makes sense with some of these plans. So if I can just add something about Gilbert, I wasn't around and I don't live in Gilbert, so this is a somewhat uninformed question. But didn't we have this set up in Gilbert prior to the 2018 bond referendum? So we spent money in the 2018 bond referendum to undo it, and now we're going to go back to it? Is that a...
Yeah, I would agree with that because, I mean, we had the upper and middle, you had Gilbert Primary and Gilbert Elementary, and one middle school, and then one high school. So, yeah, I mean, to answer your point, it does seem very similar to what we had before the 2018 referendum. And I'll just say, as someone that lives out in Gilbert, and if you've ridden through Gilbert, the farmland is turning into housing developments rather quickly. So construction on a high school or middle school is not going to start next year, 2 years from now. It's going to start 3 to 4 years from now. So we're already behind the 8 ball 5 years from now when it gets built.
I think I'll just, what I see you're saying here, and this reminds me of kind of something I do with my team at work, is I have them use the 1-3-1 approach. So 1 is the problem, 3 is 3 potential solutions, and then the last one is what their recommendation is. That doesn't mean I always accept their recommendation, but I think that's a discussion point. So I think kind of for process, it's good for us to chime in and give feedback. But I think what I'm interpreting is what you're presenting us today is, here's the problems we've seen, here's some potential solutions, and this is our recommendation, but that's not etched in stone that we have to do that. Is that correct?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That's exactly what I was going to say. And if it is the board's desire to pursue one of these other scenarios, or even a scenario that's not presented here, then we can do that. So,
Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to the next one. Or, well, you want to talk to this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is back to that Power BI dashboard. I just wanted to give you guys a quick snapshot. That is the enrollment projection for all 4 schools in the Gilbert cluster based on what the demographer gave us, just so you can see clearly the high trajectory of growth. We wanted to give just a little bit of a graphic of the potential if you guys ended up wanting to choose scenario 2, doing the significant additions to the Gilbert High School, which would also include, we understand that they are out of parking. It would include some athletic improvements and some of those other things. It's not just the building component, but here is a potential for where we could build that without losing any of the additional parking. And then I also wanted to give you guys that school score on the top is just an average of all of those instances that we were talking about. So at Gilbert, we flagged 811 deficiencies. Those all average into a school score of 2.7 on that 1 out of 5 scale and range. And then that bluer circle on the top right takes those 811 instances and puts them into our 5 categories. So that's interiors, site, the building envelope, the mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, and health, safety, and security. So we can really start to look at where the biggest problems lie with each school.
So the 811, is that just the Gilbert High School or all the schools in Gilbert?
That's just the Gilbert High School for this one. And that does include all of their athletics facilities, which we typically walked with one of the athletic directors for all of the high schools. Here's what that floor plan could look like if you guys wanted to ever take that route. And then on the top right is the snapshot of the enrollment just for Gilbert High School. The red dot being where it would absolutely hit its maxed out capacity if everything was utilized 100% of the time. Okay. Any other questions about the Gilbert cluster? Move on. All right. So we moved on to Pelion next. So we've got Forts Pond Elementary, Pelion Middle, the old Pelion Middle School, and Pelion High School. You can tell that this one is not as red in the area, so we don't have quite as many issues with capacity here. The one area that we did see having some issues is Forts Pond Elementary is already showing at its capacity, but that site is maxed out, and there wouldn't be a really good way to add on to that school. One of the possibilities that we threw out there is that Pelion has room for the growth. There could be a sort of a shuffle around there.
Right, but we understand that there are some
Right.
uniqueness for this particular cluster. I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry.
Took all the space.
I'm not going to stand up with a microphone, but I'll stand at the podium. I know, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You want to hear what I have to say? we recognize that in this particular cluster, there are some unique attendance line challenges. So we're actually going to revisit whether we can add on to Forts Pond or not. So this is still obviously in flux.
When you say unique attendance line challenges, can you elaborate on that for us?
Yes, ma'am. If you look at the map right there, you see the little small black dots. Those are the elementary schools, okay? You see how close Forts Pond and Pillion Elementary are to one another. You almost see how Forts Pond almost juts into the Pillion attendance area with that white line. And then if you look at where growth is, growth moves back toward town. And when I say back toward town, I mean back toward the Red Bank, Lexington area. So in terms of, in theory, this school's got a tight campus. This school's got a campus with space. We can maintain that high school attendance boundary, which is important. We'll build where we have room, and we'll adjust the attendance line. There's not a great way on first pass to adjust that Forts Pond Pillion Elementary attendance line. If you just look at where the roads come in, the arteries of traffic, folks either coming in down 302, folks coming in from the Cox Ferry area back down in. We would like to try to avoid an attendance line that doesn't really make sense. So not saying it's impossible, but it does present a unique challenge of how to adjust that line and still compensate for growth that's taking place back behind it. So that's why we're continuing to look at the best alternative for the Pillion community.
And I also want to add to that, since Forts Pond, from a capacity standpoint, was the only one we're concerned with right now, we are going to talk on the next time about all of the other schools that we don't touch on here and their deferred maintenance plans and some of their other needs, because just because they don't need an addition doesn't mean they don't need a new roof and a new HVAC system and a lighting overhaul or things like that. So here's a snapshot of the growth in this area. It's not as strong if you look into the numbers, but it's still growing, like I think everywhere in Lexington is right now. Here's a little shot of if we took that scenario and built onto Pillion Elementary, what that would look like without interrupting too much of the site. The score and the circles on the top, I put the information from Forts Pond because that is the one that we're really discussing, even though the addition could potentially be at Pillion Elementary. So they ended up with a 2.9 and 263 instances of deficiencies that we located in that elementary school. Again, what that floor plan could look like and the enrollment of Forts Pond over time. Any questions about the Pillion cluster?
Can you back up 2 slides? So it says Pillion Elementary School at the top, but I see one wing addition to relieve attendance.
Yeah.
I was making sure I wasn't, which school am I looking at? So.
Yeah, this one's a little confusing because I'm giving you the information for Forts Pond, but it's at Pillion, so.
Got it, thank you.
All right, so next we have the White Knoll cluster, Carolina Springs Elementary and Middle, Deerfield Elementary, Red Bank Elementary, Saxagatha Elementary, Southlake Elementary, and all 3 White Knolls. So there's quite a few in this one. You can tell that it's also not as in the red from a capacity standpoint. So in this one, we found that the need for the 10-year projection, again, would be that Deerfield would likely need a 10-classroom addition. Carolina Springs Middle School would likely need 7 classrooms worth of addition. Talking to the district leadership, we wanted to make sure that the infrastructure of the school was going to be able to hold those. So in any instance, you wouldn't necessarily be able to get 10 in there and still have, enough lunchtime for the kids or enough space in the gym, enough playgrounds, enough car stacking distance. So we wanted to take all of that into account while we were making these scenarios. This is the snapshot of the enrollment again for that cluster. So that has every school in the White Knoll area selected here for a 10-year projection. If we did do the addition at Carolina Springs Middle, this is what that could look like. Again, in the interest of trying to interrupt the site as least as possible. The school ended up with a 2.6 on that 1 out of 5 scale and had 409 instances of deficiencies that we tracked in there. Predominantly 3s, but some 2s and 1s. And then again, on the top right, it broken down into our 5 categories that we always use.
Mr. Cooper, may I ask this question to you? Renovations and additions to schools, what is, building a brand-new facility, we kind of understand that's a long tail, but what's sort of a reasonable timeline for additions and renovations to schools, all things considered equal? I understand there's probably a lot of factors to that, but is it like a 1-2 year thing, or is it a 5-year thing?
Most of the additions, renovations you would think would plan in that 1-2 year frame. Now, when you start that would be based upon the overall schedule, based upon the, how imminent is that priority of having to adjust it. But yeah, you would be trying to do that such that it is non-disruptive in that year or 2 time frame. Mr. Jett, from the actual building of, say, a 6 classroom wing at Carolina Springs, from your experience, what type of clarification on the schedule could you give?
Typically, for an addition that size, we would try to schedule in around 15 to 18 months. That includes design time, contract negotiation, procurement, and actual construction. And when that starts would be driven by the demographer. When they're projecting, if it's year 3 or 4 or 5, we would back off of that with construction time, contract negotiation, design time.
Another thing I'd like to add too is that the goal of the additions and the sizes is to keep any students out of portables for classrooms. Keeping in mind that those could still be storage or used for other things, but I think we would all agree we don't want to have class in portables. That is part of the goal there. If we did the addition at Deerfield Elementary, this is one potential option for what that could look like. We also talked about the need to extend the car loop here for some of the stacking distance. So this one also ended up at a 2.9 with 256 instances of deficiencies that we saw there. So those kinds of things would be handled along with the addition if it happened there. Again, what that floor plan could look like and the enrollment projections for Deerfield based on the demographer's information.
Before we move on to the
Yeah.
River Bluff, Mr. Cooper, you talked about during the Pillion area, the ability or inability to redraw the lines for Forts Pond versus Pillion Elementary. Have y'all looked at the lines for the river, the White Knoll area, possibly redrawing lines to help out capacity issues for elementary schools?
From memory, I don't recall any attendance zone redistricting being considered on the White Knoll cluster.
And with this whole big project, if you will, have we given consideration to shoring up some of our elementary schools that are split feeder schools, like Deerfield and Oak Grove, going to separate, like, high school attendance areas? Like, they're split between attendance areas.
Yes, so we do look at that. We do consider that in a perfect world. We would love pure direct feeders, but from priority, we start. I guess really I'd say from the upper level down. The high school attendance zone being the ones that are, I guess, the most sacred, for lack of a better word. And ensuring that we have middle school direct feeders is incredibly important because they're in. And we did that with, yes ma'am, with Lakeside. So then as you take it down a priority level, so then the next priority level would be the elementary schools. Split feeders we have are Deerfield, Oak Grove, Lexington Elementary, and New Providence. So, yes ma'am. So those are the 4 split, and South Lake. South Lake splits between White Knoll Middle and Carolina Springs as we took basically the Carolina Springs elementary students that came and the Saxagatha students. Carolina Springs, former Carolina Springs students tracked to Carolina Springs Middle. Former Saxagatha students that are at South Lake tracked to White Knoll.
I'm thinking high school attendance area. Like, Oak Grove Elementary has some that half are in the River Bluff attendance area, half are in the White Knoll attendance area. Like,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that happens, but once they get to their middle school, it is a pure feeder from the middle to the high. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that is the level at which we've, corrected with, or not corrected, but shored up with Lakeside. At the elementary, we do have those areas. Now, at the elementary, also because of the constraints, in my opinion, the constraints that you have from a capacity standpoint, you've got to look at that first, and sometimes that shifting has to occur just to ensure you have that space available. They're smaller schools, so that one neighborhood will hammer an elementary school harder than it would a great big 5A high school. So trying to shift those, perfect world, yes, that would be great, but the flexibility is needed at some of those areas that we mentioned to ensure that we have our enrollments balanced and trying to maximize the space, if that makes sense.
If I can piggyback on Ms. Henson's questions, and I'm sure I'll probably get crucified for this, but I'm going to say it with the caveat that it would be irresponsible from a financial perspective, in my opinion, to not know what redrawn attendance lines would look like and or enrollment freezes. I know Lexington Richland 5 has, during their recent bond referendum, they provided the community two options: with the referendum, without the referendum, what schools would their areas go to. I think that we should, at least if we didn't look at that, I think we need to look at that. That's my personal opinion.
Alrighty. So next, we went to the River Bluff cluster, including Lakeside Middle, Meadow Glen Elementary and Middle, Midway Elementary, New Providence Elementary, Oak Grove Elementary, and River Bluff High. And to that point earlier, obviously we had to kind of choose which one to drop some of those elementary schools in that are subdivided, try to go by which side it leans into a little bit more than the other. And clearly, this one is hitting a lot more capacity, a lot faster than some of the other regions. So if we looked at just the straight up needs from a capacity standpoint here, New Providence Elementary would need about 14 classrooms for the 10-year projection of growth. Midway Elementary is sitting in 10 years right at that capacity, so it's adequate for 10. Meadow Glen Elementary would need at least 9 classroom addition. Oak Grove would need about 3, and Lexington Elementary we think would need more of an admin addition because they're having a lot of their administrative spaces in the classrooms. So that's going to affect any growth that happens there. If we could take those staff spaces out and move the students into the classrooms, that would be ideal there. So we looked at scenarios of doing these multiple additions. Again, talking through with leadership, we know that at New Providence, you're not going to be able to fit 14 classrooms on there. They've already had additions to it. Meadow Glen Elementary, that 9 can handle everything, but it really doesn't help with the swing of attendance. So we also looked at doing a new elementary school to accommodate the growth there. We looked at the potential for redrawing boundaries here to accommodate some of the overflow. We looked at potentially doing a retrofit or a phased rebuild at Midway that could house it. We thought through that one and said there's going to be way too many students on that campus if we went that route. So we kind of landed here that likely you might need a new elementary school. The projections are showing about 900 students, and that's a whole school. So here's your projected enrollment growth in the River Bluff cluster. And this slide's a little different from all the rest because this has sort of been where we've been landing on the most discussion, I think, on what the best scenario is here. We know in the previous bond it was recommended to do a new elementary school, and it seems like because of the growth, the need for that is even greater. So we wanted to compare these 4 elementary schools here kind of side by side for you guys to see that none of the addition solutions are really going to suffice for that much growth. So as of right now, we've kind of landed on a new elementary school being the ideal scenario for that one. And then every individual score for the schools, and then again, the instances of deficiencies across them. Oops, too fast. So to help relieve that in the meantime, we could do a 9 classroom addition at Meadow Glen. to try to help ease into the enrollment growth. This one landed out at 2.8 with 187 deficiencies. That would also be handled in the addition phase if that's the route you guys wanted to go. A shot of what that floor plan could look like and the enrollment graph as well. Oak Grove Elementary, that needs at least those 3 classrooms and some bathrooms, some, additional spaces with it. Our idea here is to infill that breezeway that's under there and kind of take up that space and just reclaim that for some classrooms. And then there's a screenshot of what that floor plan could look like if we infill the breezeway and the enrollment projection for Oak Grove. River Bluff High School is also going to run into a bit of a capacity issue here. So our initial recommendation is to build a 1-wing addition to alleviate that growth. And it was already planned to have an addition in this spot, so that would be kind of the perfect location if you guys wanted to take this route as well. They came in at a 2.8 and had 467 instances of deficiencies. And again, that includes athletics and everything in between.
I have a question.
Yep.
When we were looking at the Gilbert attendance area, you talked about if the availability of land to possibly build a new high school, it would, you'd have to find that big tract of land. Did you all look at the availability of land, or is that discussed in that River Bluff attendance area? Because that was, with the previous bond, like you just addressed, new elementary school was recommended, and then
Yeah, the land acquisition here is a tougher thing. That is why one of the scenarios that we looked at is doing a rebuild at Midway Elementary School, because it has so much land there. And as we were thinking, could we do a phased rebuild out on the backside and then slowly build out the site again? But the stacking distance alone, you'd have to have so many principals and staff there to be able to handle that many kids. So that is why we looked at that scenario. Maggie has been talking to the district's real estate team to see what the prices of land and things and options and availability would be if we were to go that route. But that would be part of the challenge in this one. That's why I said that's kind of the most conversations happened in this area.
Ask you guys, can you expound a little bit on site limiting factors when it comes to adding on to elementaries?
Yep, absolutely. So there obviously is going to need to be a ton of car stacking space, bus stacking space. You need to have enough room for all of the playgrounds at all the different age levels that you would have. There's also the infrastructure issues that come into it, which you saw more of in Gilbert, having the sewer capacity problems. You got to bring the water in and everything else to the site. Stormwater retention ponds, things like that. So there's a lot that would go into it that really keeps you from being able to build on some of these sites, aside from just not having the space. Does that answer, sort of? Okay. Snapshot of what this floor plan could look like if you guys wanted to take that route. This one's got a bit of a funky enrollment situation here, but that is based on what the demographer gave us. Any last questions about that cluster before we move on?
So no issues in the middle schools in the River Bluff attendance, not issues, but no capacity concerns
issues
in the middle schools in the River Bluff?
Not from what we found for the future 10 years, at least. All right, so Lexington cluster, we've got Beechwood Middle, Lake Murray Elementary, Lexington Elementary, Lexington High, the existing Technology Center, Pleasant Hill Elementary and Middle, and Rocky Creek Elementary. So this one's pretty dark in the color as well. You can tell that one's going to have some capacity issues coming up. At a first glance here, if we did any additions that we needed to accommodate the capacity, Rocky Creek would need about 12 classrooms for the 10-year projection. Lexington High School would need about 22, and I think everyone knows that site is very maxed out already. The Pleasant Hill combo would need about 15 classrooms on that site. So we looked at doing some scenarios here that also include repurposing to primaries and uppers. What we landed on as a group for the initial thought is potentially to do a 12 classroom addition at Rocky Creek and shuffle some attendance. keeping in mind how many classrooms you can actually fit with the infrastructure that's there as well. So that one's going to have some limiting factors for us. Lexington High School, like I said, you're out of sight there. You really don't have any space that you can build, and you need all of that parking for the students. So one of the things that we were thinking about in this area is potentially reclaiming some of the space from the existing technology center, which we'll have a slide to explain how that would work later on. And then we were thinking to potentially repurpose Pleasant Hill Elementary to be the upper, build a standalone primary elementary on that site. Because that site has quite a bit of land too that's already owned by the district. It wouldn't have to be an acquisition there for that one.
Dr. Price, I don't know if this is a question for you, but from an education perspective, what's at play? What do we have to do with our instructional department team to accommodate moving from the current academic structure of elementary, middle, and high to this type of a structure? And also, what kind of additional administrative costs come with that? You don't have to give me an exact number, but just sort of in theory.
So anytime you're looking at opening a new campus, you want to have a principal for that campus. And Mrs. Price went through the state staffing guidance and how we staff according to our formulas. That would be included if we were to open up a primary school. It would need a principal and an assistant principal, and then all of the staff that would be appropriately certified there. But in addition to that, you would also look at the instructional components. Typically, your primary would be a pre-K through 2, and your elementary would be 3rd through 5th grade. And so that aligns if you look at state assessments, where they are tested 3rd through 5th grade. So the focus in 3rd through 5th is pretty consistent when you go campus to campus, and pre-K through 2nd is a little bit different. So all of that would have to be taken into consideration. In addition to that, in a primary building, your classrooms are going to look different than a 3rd through 5th grade structure. So all of that would have to be taken into consideration. But as far as staffing and building with cafeteria staff, custodial staff, administrative staff, counseling staff, all of that would be very similar whether you had 2 elementary schools or a primary versus upper elementary.
Kind of a follow-up to that question, Dr. Price. How do we feel in general about some clusters having the primary and the secondary, others not? I mean, it starts mixing up our model a bit.
It does, and this again is just an initial stab at a potential fix. And as Ms. Smith mentioned, a lot of these, well, not a lot, but these 2 scenarios where you would be going to that type of a model is what was done prior to the previous bond referendum. And so while we look at these recommendations, we would need to have that conversation with more people to see if this is the direction that we want to go. Looking at available land space plays a factor. In the Gilbert cluster, if we were to build another elementary school or open another elementary school rather than doing the primary upper elementary philosophy, then you've got a building there in Gilbert Middle with the question of what do we do with that building. So if we open up another elementary school, we would need to look at how we could still utilize that facility as we move forward. So there's a lot of complicating factors, and that's why we're sharing the different scenarios right now so that we can initiate discussion before we narrow down and have a very clear vision of the path we're going to take. So again, this is just an initial stab at a proposal, and depending on the discussion and the interest of our board and our community, that will chart where we go next.
Okay, so for the Pleasant Hill combo, this is just a really rough, kind of idea at how you could place a new school here, shift your athletics back into the land that the district already owns, and then wrap a new fire lane around, just for us to do a bit of a fitting test to make sure you could actually get this on this site here.
Quick question about that.
Yeah.
would you require any changes to car line stacking there with a whole nother school there?
Yes, absolutely. We would have to rework it, and that's why we kind of cited it right there, centralized to some of the loops. But that would have to be part of this project, mostly for the stacking space, but also just for the circulation to make sure that the drop-off and safety of kids is good. So also in this cluster, Beechwood Middle School, we were recommending that you do some additions onto these wings here. We wanted this one to kind of even out with the way that the grades line up in those wings as well, because I know it's split 6, 7, 8. They ended up with 235 instances of deficiencies here, so our recommendation would be to do a 3-wing addition. And that's what that floor plan would look like if we added a few classrooms onto the end of each wing. And again, they also have a bit of a funky enrollment projection, but that is from the demographer. Lexington Elementary, this is what it would look like if you guys wanted to do that admin addition to get some of the admin back out of the classrooms. It would be a complete overhaul of the existing admin to make that space be a lot more efficient than it currently is, because of the way that it's built out, it's not maximizing its space. And then also with the possibility next to the art classroom to build an additional admin area.
Can you help us understand what you mean by admin don't have space? Like, I'm not following. I obviously don't.
And some of their offices are in classrooms, so if we can move them out of classrooms, then they'll also get more classroom space.
Correct, yeah.
And that's not something that happens at most of our other elementary schools because they're newer, obviously, than sort of this setup. Is that what I'm?
Correct, yeah. This one I think has maybe the worst case of needing to put admin to those spaces just because of the way that it was set up. There are some other schools that are doing that too, but they don't have the capacity issue that we're as concerned with it. So we took that kind of, not only when we were walking through the spaces to see what was being used as, but we also took all of the master bell schedules for every school, paired those up with the classroom so we could tell which space was being used by who, when. So.
Can we go back to Beechwood Middle?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, y'all may not know this. When was Beechwood Middle open?
19.
2019. So 5, 6 years ago. And we're already looking at adding 3 wings, 12 classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
This question kind of swirling around in my brain too. Can you just tell me, refresh our memory, what was the last like 5 builds? I mean, not including South Lake, but before that, what were the last 5?
South Lake, Lakeside, Indian Middle, Centerville, Beechwood.
And the reason I asked that question is because
Yeah, no?
it's because school's only been open 5, 6 years, and we're already talking about adding to it. So I think if you get anything from me, what I says is, from what I say, is the long-term plan growth is what we really need to look at, because I don't want to build a new school and then 5 years later we're already having to add on to it. So I just want to kind of make that point that we need to definitely look at. I know we try to do everything 5, 10 years, but I mean, we're already looking at this school and adding to it. So we know.
Well, and then if you look at that list, 3 out of the 5 are basically at capacity.
Mr. Cooper, just
Clearly building them too small.
one other question. Is it correct Beechwood Middle was not included in the 2018 referendum? It was built with 8% bond money, correct? Or am I incorrect?
It was not in the 2018 bond, no, sir.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess I wonder, we don't have to unpack this here, but kind of makes you wonder, because you're building it with 8% bond money, did we limit what we could actually do versus a bond referendum where you planned it out and you built it a little bit larger?
Referendum buildings that we've built are too small as well.
I think the whole point of what we're trying to do now is to develop a strategic plan that goes 10 years and further, and that we reevaluate that. So I think right now we are trying to rectify a lot of these things. So, yeah.
And going to what Mr. Pizzuti said, I think that this is, look back and a learning process for us, and we did miss the mark on some of the things. Pleasant Hill Elementary alone was probably the one we misjudged the most. They opened with portables and currently have, 28 portables now, I believe is the number. So, yeah, this is strategic.
Sorry, just one thing on that as a board while we're talking about this. When y'all give us more information for the next meeting, is there a way, and I'm trying to see it through the way my brain works, which I know is crazy. We need a capital improvement plan that's obviously 5-10 years. We've got our 8% bonds, which are more like individual 12-month plans. And then we need a long-range plan. So we're trying to do we're talking about a lot that's ultimately going to parse out into sort of 3 different plans, give or take. Can you break that out for us? Like what reliefs are we talking about for an 8% bond fund, a 5-year capital improvement plan, and then a 10-year long plan? Because I'm having a hard time figuring out where this all fits in the puzzle pieces.
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And we've had those conversations with district leadership, with defining those, with using those parameters as definitions, and we do plan to get there. We wanted to just bring forward the biggest rocks that we have to move to get to again, set up this mindset of strategic thinking, having you all understand the challenges of this Rubik's Cube of a problem for every cluster. We're introducing to you the questions that we ask so that you can in turn ask those questions, answer them in your mind as board members, representatives of your community, to really embrace what the plan can entail. So we will get there.
Okay, so again, this is Rocky Creek Elementary. If we did do an addition at the school, that is what that could possibly look like, and also with a car loop extension at this campus. They had 303 instances of deficiencies at this school. That would also be fixed when addition potentially happens. This is what that floor plan could possibly look like, and again, a snapshot of their enrollment. Graphic for you guys of what Lexington Elementary could look like if you did any of the admin additions that we were recommending. They had 329 instances of deficiencies at that school. So this is the one that I mentioned earlier with Lexington High School needing about 22 classrooms to accommodate their growth. We were playing around with the idea of potentially doing a new centralized tech center and then taking this back over mostly for the high school. So in the peach color here is what could be reclaimed for traditional classrooms for the high school. The purple represents tech programs that are already housed within every other high school. So to give the equity of still having, the business classes and the things that aren't as high base spaces, so that those kids don't have to travel to a tech center just like the other high schoolers don't have to travel to one for those types of classes. We also saw a bit of a need for additions at the maintenance building. So in the blue color, instead of spending the money to do any additions there, those spaces could just be reclaimed by the district to take care of the things that they need in those areas.
And what kinds of things are that in maintenance? Paint, I don't know.
Right, yeah. So when we were walking through that area, they needed more high-based areas. They needed car lift kind of things so they can maintain their vehicles. And Jim could probably speak better to this than I can, but.
Sure. What we would do, as Sarah alluded, is we need more high bay areas for our maintenance mechanics. Instead of building an addition at the maintenance shop, it would make more sense and be more cost effective to move them up there. We already have the space, and we wouldn't have to repurpose it. So I'd most likely move my mechanics up there, maybe some electricians. Just to try to more efficiently use the space we
And we were also talking about this because the existing tech center is a bit far for, say, the Pelion cluster students to bus all the way into. So having a more centralized tech center for everybody to go to would be ideal, was our thought process there. So this would just be a good way to use the space that you already have and with minimal renovation to it.
So, Dr. Price, quick question. Obviously, a new tech center would not happen next year or the next year, right? And so what she was just saying, I've also heard from administration at LTC that there are classes there that all other local high schools have on their campuses except for LHS. So then I start thinking, well, what if LHS does use some of their FTEs for those positions? I'm just thinking CTE stuff down the road. Like, we could go ahead and get some more CTE stuff in there if Lexington would absorb those back in their school. Do you see what I'm saying? Like,
Right now, they're not, those FTEs are not housed directly as a part of LHS, and I don't see Ms. Price over there to
right,
confirm
so they're
that, but
using LTCs
correct.
when like
So-
River Bluff, Gilbert, Pillion have to use their own FTEs for those
Correct.
classes.
So if those were to become part of Lexington High, then we would have to look at, in order to, or the ability to add some of those programs, if a new LTC were added, those programs that are currently at LTC that are not on the other campuses would go to the new center. And then we would give us the opportunity to grow and add more available space.
Right, no, I totally understand what you're saying. I'm just saying like next year or the next year. Right, like LTC is having to use some of their FTEs for LHS students, just graduation requirement classes, when our other schools aren't. So could we look at making LHS use their FTEs for that so that we can have more CTE opportunities?
It would be shifting from one to the other, but if we're going to add positions, that's additional teaching positions that we would have to find
Yeah,
funds
and
for
we
to
could
add.
totally look at that,
Yeah.
I think.
You know, as we grow in students, we look at trends to determine how many FTEs we add. And if those became part of LHS, then they would roll over to the LHS faculty. But if we don't have additional opportunities for students to explore at LTC, then we would be doing additional teaching positions without the projected student enrollment to go with it. If they were to add and students would come from other schools, then the FTEs at those schools would be adjusted because those students wouldn't be on campus at that time. That's the formula that we use. So determine on the student enrollment and participation, that's how we determine staffing at the College Center and at LTC, based on where the students are coming from. Those numbers are adjusted.
Okay, so if the initial recommendations were what you guys wanted to go with, this is just a quick graphic of where the new facilities would roughly be located. That being 2 elementaries, a middle, and the centralized tech center. And turn it over to Maggie.
These are our last couple slides. I know we're right on our time.
Hey, I'm Maggie. I am with Thompson Turner working on the estimating side, which I know is a lot of big questions about what is the cost of all of this and how does that play in. We are working on that. There's a lot of variables that go into putting cost with scenarios. So all of the information here in this graphic on the left is what you guys have been talking through. It's all the months of work that MPS's team has done on site, and it's a lot of work. It's what the demographer has put together. They're working through synthesizing that information and trying to come up with recommendations. That's what you're seeing, kind of their initial first pass. I would say at this point, we're kind of in this gray box area where they're working on what programming looks like for additions and new facilities. And then I'm working on, and my team is working on what those costs are gonna be. So we have a team of about 5 estimators that have already been working on pricing a lot of the capital improvement maintenance side of things, which is what we would see at your existing schools. And then as we've been fed information about potential solutions to some of your growth and capacity needs, we've been working on pricing what that could be. So in the end, when we're putting together the 10-year capital plan, it's going to include the renovation cost, the addition cost, and the new facility cost. With all of the variables associated with that, we don't have a cost for you today, but we hope to have a draft for you in the next board workshop so you can start seeing the magnitude of what all of these potential solutions are going to cost. And then I just kind of threw up a graphic here too. I know you asked a question about timeline and kind of how we lay all these things out. A lot of these potential solutions, growth-wise and based off the Demographer's recommendations, are landing in that 1 to 2 year of the 10-year range. So, and that is a large amount of cost. And so there's going to be some work associated with figuring out how to spread that cost over the 10 years and what, you know, you can afford through that process. Sorry, I talk with my hands. And part of the cost that I have been tasked with is to figure out how to predict inflation. So, and if I could do that, we make a lot of money. But what we do use is the Turner Building Cost Index. We look at the last 5 years and try to figure out what we've been seeing for inflation so that we can apply that to your projects. So once we kind of are able to start putting this on a timeline, we can apply the escalation costs to it so you get an accurate picture of what you think you're going to see. So we're really working hard with the NPS team and the district leadership to figure out how to lay it out on a schedule and then how to give you the best cost prediction that we can so that we set you up for success once you go out and start asking, figuring out how to actually fund the program. So are there any questions on the cost side of things?
So I think you've got a tall task there. I'm hearing you've got 5 estimators, and I understand. The concern that I have, and maybe you can unpack this for me, the concern I have is they're giving you some scenarios to estimate and start looking at, but we have talked today as a board as some of those things we may change. Mm-hmm. How much heartache or headache does that create for you all when we make a change? Because sometimes you can get so far down the path, mm-hmm. It's like starting all over again. So are there stops along the way where you don't have to keep restarting, or are you doing your estimating in a certain capacity so that you can adjust on the fly? I don't know if you can unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so we develop what we call a pro forma for the growth and capacity schools. So renovations are kind of straightforward. We've gotten a lot of information. There's a lot of issues that we've priced. So that's where you're kind of seeing those 5 estimators working through a lot of things and then trying to come up with kind of a holistic view of what the renovation needs are at each school. So we've been able to work on that in the background and get all of that pricing close to pull together, which we're finalizing. When it comes to additions and new schools, that's where we're going to see more of your guys' input kind of affecting the square footages, the classroom counts, like what exactly is it? Are we doing a middle school? Are we doing a high school? So what we've developed is a pro forma. And as you guys feed us potential changes, we're able to go in and make adjustments to that pro forma fairly quickly. We do have, based off of these, like a middle school pro forma kind of currently mapped out. There would be no escalation built onto that right now because we don't know where that lands, right? So I can't tell you, oh, it's going to be X cost right now because I don't know yet. But now that I know that maybe the high school is what you may lean more towards, I can develop a pro forma for that, and then you kind of see what those 2 options are going to be. We wouldn't want to do a lot of scenarios, so you kind of want to start honing in on what you want to do, but we can absolutely do a lot of options for you to see, this versus this and what you feel like the community could support financially.
And I don't think we want to exhaust you all with 100 scenarios that you look at, but a follow-up question, you may not have the full answer, maybe for Mr. Cooper or Dr. Price. So we have had a particular prototype for an elementary school or for a middle school, or we've had a prototype. but I'm hearing some of our prototypes we're having to add to now. So are we talking about estimating roughly with that same prototype in those models, or are we trying to expand to a larger footprint for that expansion? Because I don't think, going back to kind of what Mr. Pizzuti said, I don't think you want to say, hey, this is our model, this is our prototype, we've built this before, and then we turn around and say, but by the way, we need to add other additions. I mean, I would think you have the additions in up front. I don't know, that's kind of where I'm going on that, is how are you going about doing that without us having you look at 100 things over and over again? I don't know if MPS is going to develop a new prototype or whether we take the existing prototype. I guess that's what I wanted to kind of understand a little bit better.
I was just going to make a comment. It depends on the scenario. Like, one of the potential proposals was to build a new middle school in the Gilbert area. Well, we've got a prototype for that middle school, and if we needed to tweak it to adjust for potential growth beyond 10 years, then we've got that in the current prototypes where you could simply add onto those wings. So we could take that into consideration. If the new LTC format goes through, well, there's no prototype for that. We would have to design that, or they would have to design that. And then there's the concept of a primary. In the Gilbert area, they would be renovating existing spaces. At the Pleasant Hill area, it would be an addition of a brand-new primary building. There's no prototype for that. So we would have a prototype for a new middle school. We wouldn't for a primary or an LTC. And if we were to take the option of going with a high school, then there are some prototypes, but high schools are typically more uniquely designed than a standard prototype. That's been the approach thus far. So we could stick with a prototype, or we could do a unique design for a high school, which is what we've done in the past. So we've got flexibility there. Does that help?
Any other questions? I know we're a little bit over. I did want to just mention next steps for you all in this group. Obviously, this is our initial review. I hope that we have given you enough information to really think about how we finalize, how we work toward the finalization of this plan. Obviously, this was a first pass. It's meant to be a first pass. You may hate all of it. You may hate some of it, but you can see how challenging this is. But it is all very, very important work, and I love a challenge, but this is very challenging, and so I encourage you. We're happy to share whatever maintenance reports we have, other information you all may need in advance of the next date, March 10th, where we're together, so we can continue this good work. Thank you.
I guess I'll just say, I mean, I can't speak for the whole board. I just speak for myself. I think y'all have done a tremendous amount of work, a lot of inputs into this, and you've had to kind of cull through it and put it in some shape or form so that we can digest it. So I think kudos to y'all. Great job with that. I guess, Dr. Price, one of the takeaways I'd like to have for us as a board is typically you leave a meeting and you kind of have your action steps. So kind of what do you all need from us as a board between now and March 10th to help this process continue to move along productively and as efficiently as possible?
Thank you for that question. I think it would be really helpful to begin thinking about a few things in particular. I was just listening to the discussion and the questions from the board during the presentation. So looking for some guidance on the Gilbert area and whether there's a new middle school pursuit or a new high school pursuit. And then also the concept of a restructure, repurpose for primary versus upper elementary. So that's one thing I would ask you to think about. Number two, based on questions, I would say also with that same primary upper elementary, think about the Pleasant Hill proposal that we saw today, that we've got land there. If we were going to go for an additional elementary school in that area, then that would mean we need to go search for potential available land. And then the third thing that that I would ask you to think about is the new additional elementary school to help with projected growth in the New Providence, Meadow Glen area. I know that that was a proposal in the last bond referendum to add an elementary school in that area. And I think the location of that potential school was a point of concern, and we pivoted and went in a different direction. But there is obvious need for growth relief in that area. So we've got some available land to add an addition at Midway, but to add an additional 700 to 900 students onto that campus would not be a practical solution. So I ask you to think about that and what ideas you may have with regards to that. So those are my 3 burning questions after listening to the presentation and the questions, just sitting over here taking notes, that I would ask the board to think about over time. And our team here could incorporate direction or feedback that you have on those 3 things and incorporate that into the next presentation, in addition to what they've already planned to go a little bit deeper for some of those maintenance costs on the facilities that weren't discussed today. They're going to talk about some of those high-level needs in those different sites. That'll be in the next presentation, but from today's presentation, those are questions that I have that I'd love to hear the board's thoughts on that as we move forward in this process. And again, first step, not a defined picture of where we're going. So I appreciate the team from MPS and Thompson Turner for coming in. They have been doing a lot of work on this, and for some of them, there are no easy answers, but we've got a challenge that we've got to tackle. And so we're committed to doing that, and this will be a long process as we move forward together through this.
I have one question, and I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, so I'm gonna do one question first, and depending on the answer, I may have a backup question. When y'all were looking at the scenarios and just the whole plan, are y'all only looking at like the facility stuff, or are y'all looking at any like funding strategies in the same boat?
Well, we're also considering funding strategies. So leading back to that earlier question about what would be maintenance, what would be 8%, what would be capital, what would be going to the bond. We want to identify those buckets of funding with the pairing of the program, with the components of the program.
So, follow-up question to that. Well, y'all understand, I think all the board members know, the community knows that facilities, funding is ultimately a community burden. When y'all were looking at this, whether it's 8% bond, are y'all actively looking at other strategies like partnerships, sponsorships, naming rights, any of that other stuff that could help or could give recommendations, or are we just looking at, hey, straight, we're going to go by what we've done in the past?
I mean, we're always open to creative solutions that are brought to the table. I don't know that anything has been completely ruled out as a no-go, but I defer to leaders.
That's in their work right now. That's not on probably their plate. That may fall more to our area, and certainly we can start looking into some of that if that's a discussion we want to have. That would be a new way of doing things, but certainly not something that shouldn't be considered. It's never been something in my experience I would take that back. I have had some experience in a previous bond referendum where we tried to look at multi-use facilities and working with multi-governmental agencies to build, and have had experience doing that with one facility where you had a public library along with a technical kind of facility as well as office facility. And so there are some examples. They are not very common. I think the facility that you all, some that I went and saw in Texas, Mr. Insame saw, that was also a joint kind of funded facility. So absolutely, we can start researching those and get some information.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I ask is because, I mean, we've seen just some of the sessions and stuff we've gone through. Other districts are starting to kind of branch outside the box and do some of these hybrid models and partnerships. So just something I think we should look into.
I have a couple questions. Once the study is complete, what is the process or timeline for translating it into a formal capital improvement or long-range plan?
I'll jump in and give it a first go. So once we finalize and kind of come to an agreement about where we want to go, then we look at timelines, look at funding structures, potential partnerships, and collaborative agreements to do some of these things. And from there, we'll determine when do we need to start. Looking at the projections for enrollment, and depending on, so as I believe they said they're going to have phases as what's your immediate needs, what's a little bit later, and then what's 5 years and beyond. So we would need to identify which of those projects are of the utmost importance and when that would need to begin and work backwards from there. I think that's part of the process. I don't know that we could answer it specifically at this time, but that's kind of a progression of how this process will work, is starting with identifying or agreeing upon the direction that we're going to take, figuring out when we need it, working backwards from there, and then determining the funding mechanisms to do so.
That's right. Part of the ultimate plan and our deliverable is to create that master schedule for the capital improvement, for the long-term facility plan. It's a master schedule. Every facility will fall in that schedule, however, 60 months plus, right? So.
Okay. And then I'm the board's legislative gal, so I have a couple just really quick questions. When you're looking at coordinating with, I guess, or planning for either new schools or, adding enrollment, things like that, was there any coordination with Lexington County, our municipalities regarding projected growth areas, land use, and how those align with what we're anticipating future school capacity needs?
I think that may, Clark, you may want to answer this, but.
That process would start when we had a direction. So if we were looking at building a new school and we're looking at acquiring property, there's that prescribed process of Office of School Facilities and municipalities reviewing the site and the plans to ensure it's appropriate for that building. It meets the needs and the community. When I say the community, I mean the infrastructure can support that. So that would be down the road when we knew we want to build this here, and then working with those municipalities and government organizations.
Okay, so there's no, is there ever a plan kind of to reverse engineer that and work with kind of those municipalities and the county and the town for what is, more collaborative, instead of saying, well, this is what we're going to do here. So, y'all figure out more of hey, what are y'all's plans? What are your future 5 to 10 year plans? And can we collaborate on where the best place would be? We're looking at having to build this building and we want to work with you instead of just saying this is what we're going to do and figure it out.
Absolutely. I think in order for this, whatever the plan is, to be successful, it's got to include collaboration. I think we can always learn from past practices about how we could do better moving forward. So I think the more collaboration we have, the better off we'll be as a community.
And that goes for transportation too. That was the other kind of caveat to my question, was just, I'm sure that our area has long-range plans, unlike we do. They probably have 5-10 year long-range plans for transportation, new roads, new, ideas that they want to implement. Can we work with them to get those plans so we can kind of figure out what, so we're not knocking heads down the road. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Great point.
Last thing, Dr. Price, you told us the 3 things you want from a board, and I'm just trying to make sure I capture everything. I think there is an action item for MPS to send us those deficiency reports and the
Yes.
donut report.
Yes, yes.
Okay, I think that's the only
Absolutely.
other thing I captured that we need to get also.
When we also get some of that, can we look at the existing capital funds that we have still open? So current bonds, there's projects on each of those that may be in progress or may not be in progress. When we talked, I believe, Mr. Cooper, it was in August, I think you stated that y'all had walked a lot of this with them, and some of the recommendations that y'all brought forward to us for the most recent 8% bond were based on facility needs that you noticed during that. So what have we already, when you send us those facility maintenance things, what have we already identified and we're already tackling it? And then, are there any things on these open bonds, including the 2018 bond referendum, that we don't need anymore? And if so, why?
So there are couple answers, I think. So we are continually working through, because this process began, we're walking campuses this time last year, and we have, with the 25B capital projects, some of the items listed and noted in in March of last year were part of that 25B report and are underway. So we're continually cleaning up that list. That's a work in progress. As we mentioned, and I believe you brought it up at the last board meeting earlier this week, about the open line items in the 2018 bond. At the end of this, in March, I think that was when Dr. Price said we would be bringing that back after the facility study as to what is closed out and what funds are in that over-under budget line item, and then that would be a funding source for attacking the most imminent capital improvement needs. So we can certainly provide that. I don't know if providing it March 10th is the exact right time frame. I think it would be maybe by the March board meeting or maybe the April board meeting, where we could then, we'll know the finished product here, and we could start showing, well, this is what's available, and here's a possible option to do some of these most pressing projects.
I guess my question was, though, are there any projects already on those lists? Like let's say you come to us, I believe it was White Knoll, where we're doing roof and HVAC. No? Was it White Knoll High School?
Yes.
If that was identified in that facilities report you're going to send us, we've already tackled that.
And that's
kind of what I'm getting at.
And that's what I'm saying. That is a continual process of us cleaning up that list. We work together on that, throughout this process in our conversations, to make sure it is addressed, because there are things like that. And that's a project that was on that list, but as we get them completed and we have that time frame developed, we do clean that up so you do have an accurate product. Now, there still could be, just throw one out there, Lexington High Upper Commons office renovations. If we hadn't told them about it yet, it may still be showing up on Lexington High's list, but that's a continual cleanup process that we keep doing.
All right. Well,
Ms. Henson, before we
yes,
wrap up,
certainly.
we have this plan till 11, not that we have to stay here that whole time, but are we going to have a conversation as a board about kind of the direction that Dr. Price is looking for before we leave, or are we doing that individually?
We can, yes. Personally, I need time to digest all of this. But I'm not closing the door. I think a lot of people have shared thoughts, and do you have some thoughts?
Well, I just want to make sure that come March 10th that y'all have some of those answers and direction from the board in time for them to get it, so that we can get a presentation with ample time to review it prior to a meeting. Because I don't necessarily want to be in the same situation where we can't, because we have a really short timeline here, and we're going into budget season. So I just want to make sure that we have a plan, whether that's off, like, I need to digest a lot too, but I just want to make sure that you guys get what you need, and we as a board know what your expectation of a timeline from us is in order to walk this thing down the path.
I would just say that the ideal thing is to get as much feedback and information before the March board meeting, because that's when they make their official presentation at the board meeting. So as you have thoughts and ideas, we can share it. We could build in time on the agenda at the next meeting to talk about things from this presentation. The next one's going to dive into a different topic. And if we want to build in time there to have that discussion as a board, we can put that on the agenda to do that. And then they could have those revisions made before the board presentation at the end of the month.
So when we come back March 10th, we're not looking at this same recommendation, if you will, with a narrowed focus. We're doing something separate. Is that what I heard you say?
More or less, it'll be reviewing the maintenance plan. So we will likely go through every single facility, because we have, for every single facility, we've developed a maintenance plan, and whether it needs capital improvements and whether it needs addressment for growth and capacity, right? So what we've really focused on today is growth and capacity.
So then, at our March board meeting, you're presenting a final plan, and we have to take some type of action as a board?
I was curious about that too for the 24th. It said board presentation, review, and approval. So what does that exactly mean?
Well, I believe what we're going to do is have a presentation at that time. We don't have to take action on anything. That's just their formal presentation. So it'll be presented as either new business or information.
Okay, that makes me
But we
feel
don't-
better.
We don't have to take any action
I was
at that time.
panicking that the March board meeting, we had some vote we had to take,
No,
because
ma'am.
it said action, so I
No,
feel
ma'am.
much better about
Sorry if that
us
was
talking another
confusing.
time.
Okay. No, we're good. We're good.
Dr. Price, can I chime in here? One of the things that you all can kind of talk about and think about, what I would suggest is that depending on the timing, when we see something that has a little more of the timing, and we know how much, like, some things may need to be done pretty quickly, when we get a sense of the timing, what I see happening, or recommend, is March is kind of like, here is call it a draft of what we think a 5 and 10-year plan would look like. Then we do our due diligence in going out into the community. So we have, like, this is the first draft, community, if you will, and we go out and we do those attendance meetings, we get that feedback, and then you all would adopt a plan after you do that part of it. At that point, because you would make some adjustments, some changes. That process would happen then.
That's like a 6-month, 9-month, 12-month timeline, right? Okay, so we have plenty of time. I feel
Yes.
much better now. Thank you.
Yes.
Madam Chair, one quick question too, because as I'm already starting to kind of think through some of these things, Gilbert, for example. So we've got on the table the idea of a new middle school, but we also have maybe a preference for a new high school. I'm imagining in a number of these scenarios, there may be 2 options we want to evaluate. When it talks about redrawing lines, not a very popular thing, but it's more cost effective than a new building or whatnot. And so there may be a point where we've got 2 options in a couple of these areas that we're evaluating pros and cons. And I just want to kind of set that expectation out there that that's probably where we'll need to be for a little while. And maybe even as we vet with the community, it's not just one option we're tossing out, it's 2. So just kind of want to level set that that's kind of what others are thinking as well.
Yeah, Ms. Julie, I think that's spot on, because to your point about attendance redrawing, it's not popular. But just like we teach our kids, like, you have to make a choice. And so you as the community are going to have to tell us, do you want to fund things or do you want to move schools? If those ultimately shake out to be our only 2 options, I think going to the community with more than just one set thing will help them feel more part of the process as well. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback off of that. And believe if we want this capital plan to be successful, we're gonna have the community buy-in, or it's not gonna be. So I think us as board members need to do our job out in the community by the people that elect us and make sure we get their feedback before we're just making decisions based on a presentation, if that makes sense.
And to piggyback off of you, Mr. Pizzuti, I think we do our job, but we also don't listen solely to just a loud vocal group. So I think we need to be intentional to not only, because you know our emails will light up, but I think we need to be intentional to find the silent majority out there also and hear from them and you know, not just go one route or
No, I
another.
wholeheartedly agree with you, and I think, unfortunately, or not unfortunately, but that is our job to figure out, you know, where's the medium in that voice. So I like she told Ms. Shealy, you're spot on that.
And our next community conversation is at LTC on March 18th, 19th. So I guess I would just say to the community.
In the multi-purpose room?
That is a good time to come to a community conversation and also just, thank you. I'm trying to get, Kathy wants to get out of here. No, I know. The community has opportunities to engage with us too. So relationships take a two-way street. So just sort of a nod to our community that you have opportunities to engage with your board. So please use them. Even if you can't come to a community conversation, please make sure you're communicating with us, not just being a Facebook warrior in the comments section. We certainly are fine with that, but it's not a great dialogue for us to kind of figure out where you're thinking.
At building a Facebook page for comments, just on.
Madam Chair, I'd like to table that.
Anyone else?
I'm just waiting on Mike's point of privilege, so.
Well, I'd like to thank McMillan, Pasden, and Smith for being with us today and breaking down this gargantuan task of analyzing our facilities and maintenance needs. As we've said throughout the meeting, our next workshop will be held on March 10th. And with that, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, if I may, I'd like to take a point of privilege, not to disappoint Mr. Pizzuti, but I just want to recognize the fact here that I want to say that working with this board is a pleasure. I think that everyone here does their due diligence and that we honestly work together, and that's a real pleasure. With that, I'll move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the meeting is adjourned.